I never thought the thrill of a roller coaster could compete with the fear I felt when I read the first message on her phone. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of night where everything seems normal. Kids tucked in, dishes washed, and my wife, Elena, curled up on the couch with a book she'd claimed was a little slow. I kissed her goodnight like I had for years, unaware that our marriage had already fallen off the edge. It started with a ringtone I'd never heard, a discreet buzz, not her usual chime. She was in the shower, and the screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Marco, work trip. I stared at the name longer than I should have. Then I opened the message. Had fun last time. Let's make it wilder this weekend. For a moment, my world didn't shatter. It paused, like the universe gave me a few extra seconds to breathe before it caved in. She came out of the bathroom humming, toweling her hair, acting like nothing had changed. But something had. I had. And from that moment, I stopped being her husband and started being something else. Something colder, something sharper. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I observed. I documented. Because if she was chasing adventure, I was going to show her what the end of that road looked like. And I was going to do it without raising my voice once. The next few days felt like acting in a play I hadn't auditioned for. I smiled at breakfast. I kissed her before she left for work. I packed the kids' lunches and asked about her day. All while the name Marco replayed in my mind like a bad song stuck on loop. Elena started dressing differently. Not drastically, but enough. Subtle changes that only someone truly paying attention would catch. She laughed more at her phone than at my jokes. She was alive in a way she hadn't been in years. And it hurt, because that life wasn't for me. It was for him. I didn't follow her. Not yet. Instead, I bought a notebook, black cover, unmarked, and I started writing. Day 1. Text from Marco at 11:43 p.m. She smiled at the screen for 13 seconds. Day 2. She forgot her charger, stayed out late, came back smelling like a hotel hallway, air freshener, and regret. Day 3. Phone always on silent, password changed. It was a strange power, this quiet watching. I was collecting truth, the kind of truth you don't scream about, the kind you deliver with calm precision. I knew confronting her now would give her a story. You're paranoid. He's just a friend. You never make me feel alive anymore. I didn't want explanations. I wanted the whole damn book, with footnotes. And so I waited. I waited while she packed for her conference. I waited while she hugged the kids goodbye with the same arms that had wrapped around another man. And I waited while she stepped into a life that would never feel safe again. I watched her go, not from the doorway, not from a window, but from across the street. Sitting in my car, behind tinted glass, she didn't look back. Maybe she thought she didn't need to. Maybe she thought she was clever. I followed, not too close. Just enough to know. To confirm. Airport, business class lounge. A second ticket under the name Marco De Luca. And there they were, reunited like actors in a bad romance movie. His hand on the small of her back, her smile tilted in a way I hadn't seen in years. Like adventure had a face, and it wasn't mine. They boarded the flight. Rome. It was supposed to be a tech seminar in Dallas. I didn't lose my temper. I didn't even feel rage, just an eerie calm, like the kind surgeons have before cutting deep. Back home, I opened the safe. Not for a weapon, for documents. Bank statements, property titles, insurance policies. I scanned, copied, filed. Then I called my lawyer. We'd met once before, after a minor accident. But this was different. He asked if I was ready. I said, "I'm not angry. I'm ready to move precisely." We started drafting papers. Not just divorce, custody, asset protection, digital footprint tracking, subpoenas if needed. I hired a PI in Rome, wired him the itinerary, and told him, "Don't follow her. Follow the lie." Because what she was doing wasn't just adultery. It was betrayal wrapped in adventure, dipped in thrill, served with a side of destruction, and she had no idea the man she left at home was already rewriting the ending. The PI was thorough. By the second day in Rome, I had photos. Hand-holding over candlelit dinners, kisses near the Trevi fountain, matching bracelets from a street vendor. They weren't being careful. Why would they be? They thought they were invisible in another country. But I was there in every frame, watching from behind a lens. Back home, I booked an appointment with a financial advisor. Not for advice, for leverage. I began moving assets. Legally, transparently, but strategically. Transferring accounts into a trust under my name, adjusting beneficiaries, securing what mattered. Then I prepared the house, not for her return, but for her absence. I took down our family photos, not out of spite, but preservation. I didn't want those smiles staring at me like ghosts. I boxed her jewelry, her favorite books, even her coffee mugs. Labeled everything. Stored them in the garage. I wasn't angry. I was cleaning the crime scene. On the 5th day, the PI sent a recording. They were in a rooftop bar. Marco was talking about how freeing it was to be with someone who didn't need him to be stable. She laughed. "I've lived too safe for too long," she said. With him, everything was predictable. I felt old. I replayed that part. I felt old. As if security was an insult. As if loyalty had an expiration date. And that's when I realized. She wasn't chasing love. She was chasing a version of herself she thought she'd lost. But instead of looking inward, she burned the life we built just to feel the heat. And I was done letting her light matches. When Elena returned, the silence between us wasn't icy. It was surgical. She walked through the door wearing a souvenir scarf and the kind of tan you get from careless afternoons. The seminar was enlightening, she said, dropping her bag like it still belonged here. I nodded. Welcome home. But home was no longer hers. Not really. She noticed the photos missing, the sterile counters, the way the kids didn't run up like they used to. Something had shifted, and she could feel it. But she didn't know where to touch it. I didn't confront her. Instead, I handed her an envelope 2 days later. Thick, tidy, weighted with precision. Inside, divorce papers, a proposed custody agreement, a detailed financial breakdown, and a letter. Not a rant. A record. It read, "You chose adventure over stability, illusion over intimacy. You pursued excitement like a drug and forgot who built the roof over your thrills. I'm not punishing you. I'm liberating you from the life you clearly outgrew. And I'm liberating myself from waiting for a woman who stopped coming home years ago." She didn't cry right away. She folded the letter slowly, read it again, then whispered, "So that's it?" I looked at her, the way you look at an old photograph. Nostalgic, but no longer in love. That's it. She left that night. No shouting, no begging, just quiet defeat. And for the first time in months, I slept. But peace didn't last long. 3 weeks after she moved out, her calls started. At first, they were logistical. What time to pick up the kids, who kept the dog, whether she could grab a few books she left behind. Then came the late-night texts. I miss our Sunday mornings. Do you still make that cinnamon coffee? Can we talk? I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I'd already said everything in that letter. Besides, her silence had lasted years. Mine deserved a moment. Then one day Marco called. Yes, the man she left me for. He was calm, polite even. Said he needed to speak man to man. About what? I asked. Elena, he said. She's not who I thought she was. I almost laughed. He continued. She talks about you all the time, about how you always had everything together. She said she felt safe. That word again. Safe. The very thing she threw away now haunted her in Roman hotel rooms and espresso bars. Because what she thought was freedom had no structure, no roots, just thrill and decay. I told him, she left because she thought safety was boring. Now she's learning chaos is expensive. And I hung up. That night, I stared at the empty side of the bed and didn't feel alone. I felt relieved. Because I didn't just lose a wife. I escaped a woman addicted to destruction. Elena showed up unannounced one afternoon. The kids were at my sister's. I was cleaning out the garage when I saw her car pull into the driveway, slowly, like maybe if she went slow enough, the moment would forgive her. She stepped out, not dressed to impress, just jeans, sneakers, a tired face. I'm not here to fight, she said, holding her palms up. Good, I replied, setting down a box. Because there's nothing left to fight over. She stood there, awkward, vulnerable. The woman who once walked out with fire in her eyes now looked hollow. I made a mistake, she finally said. I thought I needed excitement. I thought I needed something different. I let the silence stretch. But Marco's not you, she added, voice cracking. He's unpredictable. I thought that's what I wanted. Turns out I just wanted to feel seen again. I leaned against the doorway. You were always seen. But you mistook security for invisibility. That's on you. Tears welled in her eyes. Can we try again? That's when I knew. She didn't miss me. She missed who she was when she was with me. And I couldn't be her mirror anymore. No, I said gently. You don't get to burn the bridge and expect it to hold your weight when the fire goes out. She looked down, nodded slowly, and walked away. That was the last time she stood in our driveway. But her shadow lingered for months. Months passed. The kids adapted faster than I did. Children are strangely resilient. They stopped asking where Mom was on school nights, stopped waiting by the window on weekends. Me? I rebuilt in quiet motions. I rearranged the furniture, repainted the living room, adopted routines that didn't have her fingerprints. Slowly, I became someone who didn't flinch when her name appeared in conversations. One night, as I tucked our daughter into bed, she asked, "Daddy, are you happy?" It stopped me cold. I thought about the ache, the betrayal, the nights I paced the house in silence. Then I looked at her, this beautiful little soul who still believed the world could be soft. Yes, I said. Now I am. She smiled and fell asleep like it was the most normal answer. That same week, I ran into Marco, at a grocery store of all places. He looked defeated, not in the way of a man who lost, but one who finally understood the price tag on illusions. I didn't think she'd ever change, he said, but I thought I could handle her. I said nothing. Then he added, "You were the one thing grounding her. I see that now." I shrugged. She wanted to fly. I let go. He nodded, and we parted like two men who shared a storm, neither one wanted again. By the time I reached the parking lot, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Closure. Life doesn't come with dramatic music or applause, but sometimes the quiet wins are louder than anything. 6 months after Elena left, I got promoted at work, regional director. Same office, bigger desk, deeper purpose. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I celebrated by buying a second bookshelf for the kids' room. Because priorities shift when you rebuild from ashes. One evening, while walking through the park, I saw a young couple arguing. Nothing loud, just enough tension to remind me of what I used to live in. The woman looked over her shoulder, frustrated. The man stood still, tired. And I thought, that used to be me. Except now, I didn't need to explain myself to anyone who mistook my steadiness for stagnation. The following week, I got a letter, handwritten, from Elena. She wrote that she was moving to a new city, alone, said she needed to find herself again without using anyone as a crutch. She thanked me for being the kind of man who never made her feel small, even when she acted that way. And at the bottom, she wrote, "I hope you're happy. Truly." I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer I once kept her anniversary cards, and whispered, "I am." Because I didn't win her back. I won myself back. And that was the better victory. 1 year after the divorce, I stood in a room full of strangers, giving a talk on resilience. Not because I was a motivational speaker, but because my company invited me to share how I led my team through personal storms without letting it affect the mission. I spoke plainly. I told them how betrayal feels like being gutted silently in public. How you keep showing up, even when your insides are screaming. But also, how healing isn't loud. It's quiet. Like learning how to enjoy your own cooking again. Like making peace with silence. Like noticing your son laugh and realizing you hadn't truly heard it in months. After the talk, a woman approached me. Mid-30s, single mom, tired eyes but brave smile. She said, "Thank you. I thought I was weak for still loving someone who broke me." I replied, "You're not weak. You're just human." The strength comes from choosing peace after the storm. That night, I walked home alone, under a soft rain. And I didn't miss her. Not anymore. I missed who I was before the damage, but only because I hadn't yet realized who I had become after surviving it. I never imagined healing would look like simplicity. But it did. I no longer felt the urge to check Elena's social media. I stopped wondering who she was seeing, if she was still chasing adventure or learning to value quiet. She was no longer the center of my story, just a chapter. And chapters end. One evening, I took the kids to the same cabin we used to vacation at. Just the three of us. We made s'mores, skipped rocks, and watched the stars like we used to. But this time, there was no missing piece. We weren't lacking anything. My daughter asked, "Do you still love Mommy?" I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted to give the right one. "I'll always care about her," I said. "But love has changed. Now I save it for people who stay." She nodded like she understood far more than a child should. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I used to think closure came from confrontation, from some final talk, some perfect explanation. But maybe closure comes quietly, when the pain no longer demands a spotlight." And with that, I closed the journal and the past. It was 2 years later when I saw her again. Random, unexpected. At a bookstore, she was standing in the self-help section, flipping through something about rebuilding after loss. She didn't notice me at first. She looked older, not tired, but wiser, as if life had finally spoken louder than her illusions. When our eyes met, she froze, then smiled. A real, humbled smile. Not the one she wore when she used to mock my routines. "Hi," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," I replied. There was no anger, no need for one last monologue. Just two people who had once shared a life, now reduced to a moment. "I heard you're doing well," she said. "I am." She nodded slowly, eyes slightly glassy. "I'm glad." And that was it. We didn't exchange numbers, didn't linger in nostalgia. Just shared a nod, a goodbye, and a mutual understanding. Some losses make room for bigger wins. I walked out of that bookstore feeling light, not because I had seen her, but because I didn't need to anymore. A few weeks after that bookstore encounter, something unexpected happened. My son, now 10, came home from school with a project. "Dad," he said, holding up a cardboard trifold, "we have to talk about our hero." I braced myself. Maybe he'd choose a firefighter or a famous explorer, or maybe her. But he said, without flinching, "I chose you." I blinked. "Why?" "Because you never gave up. Not on me, not on work, not on life." My throat tightened. I didn't need validation. But sometimes it arrives like a gift you didn't know you still needed. I helped him print photos. One of us cooking, another fixing the old bike. One where we sat on the porch doing nothing. To anyone else, it was just a quiet life. But to him, it was heroic. And in that moment, I realized, revenge doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears peace. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a dramatic comeback. Sometimes it's just becoming someone your children can proudly call their hero. The final piece came not with drama, but with a letter. An envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single page. Neat handwriting. Hers. "Adam, I don't know if this matters anymore, but I need to say it. You didn't deserve the way I left." I was chasing a feeling, not realizing the cost. I thought safety was in novelty, in excitement, but I learned too late that real safety was in your steadiness. You were the home I never appreciated until I had no keys left. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. I see you. And I'm sorry. Elena. I folded the letter. Placed it in a drawer, not out of anger, not out of hope, but because closure doesn't always arrive when you ask for it. Sometimes it shows up long after you've healed. Just to nod at your journey. I smiled, then walked back into the kitchen where my kids were laughing over pancakes. That was my closure, not the apology, but the sound of laughter I'd rebuilt from ashes. Years later, long after the dust had settled, I stood at the edge of a cliff with my daughter beside me. She was older now, almost grown, confident, kind, brave. We were watching the sun set over the ocean, and she turned to me with a quiet question. "Do you ever regret it?" I knew what she meant. The pain, the betrayal, the years of trying to keep it all together. I took a breath. "I used to," I said, "but not anymore." "Why not?" "Because every broken thing taught me how to build better. I wouldn't be who I am. You wouldn't be who you are." She nodded, letting the wind carry her silence. Then she whispered, "Thank you for staying." And that, more than any victory, more than any revenge or letter or courtroom win, that was the moment everything made sense. Not all stories need perfect endings. Some just need peace. And in that moment, I had mine. I didn't share that letter with anyone. Not my children, not even close friends. It stayed tucked in that drawer, quiet and untouched, like a reminder that not all ghosts need exorcising. Some are meant to fade gently with time. But I kept it for a reason. Not out of bitterness, not to reread, but to remember. To remember that even the worst heartbreaks can end in understanding. To remember that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. To remember that I had walked through fire and didn't just survive. I rebuilt. And one night, years later, as I closed the last page of a book I'd written, my memoir, I titled the final chapter after her last words. I see you now. Because that was the irony. She had to lose everything familiar to finally see what mattered. And I just had to stop needing to be seen, to finally live free. One day, while signing books at a local reading event, a woman approached the table. Older, graceful, unfamiliar, yet vaguely recognizable. She waited until the line thinned out, then stepped forward, eyes trembling with words unspoken. "I read your story," she said. I offered a polite smile. "Thank you." She hesitated. "I was a friend of Elena's. She passed last winter." The air around me shifted, not from grief, but from the sudden finality of it. "She read your book," the woman added softly. "Said it was the most honest thing she'd ever seen, and that you were always the better writer." We stood in silence for a while, her hands wringing the handle of a worn purse. "She wanted you to know she was proud of who you became." I didn't cry. I just nodded. Because closure, I've learned, doesn't shout. It whispers through strangers and bookstore aisles and quiet nights by the fire. And even then, it's not about them. It's about us and how we choose to carry their echoes. Years passed. My children grew, my home grew quieter, and the chaos that once ruled my world became distant ripples. But every so often, I'd walk past that drawer, the one with the letter, and I wouldn't open it. I didn't need to. Because I had built a life so full, so rich in real things, truth, love, peace, that the ghosts had nowhere to linger. One morning, as the sun spilled through the windows, I took the letter out one last time. I read it, slowly, fully. Then I folded it again and walked outside. There, in the garden we once planted together, I lit a match. The flame curled the edges, danced across her handwriting, and rose like forgiveness into the sky. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't regret. It was release. And as the ashes drifted into the morning air, I whispered, "This is the last thing I let you take." Then I turned and walked back into my life.